Okay, well, I am Mary Elizabeth Turner. I am the secretary of FHSU AAUP. I am also the current sitting president of the Kansas Conference of AAUP. Academically, I'm a librarian and I'm the science librarian. So I am liaison to biology, geosciences, and physics. So being that the Sternberg is here, I get to work quite a bit with paleontologists. So. Okay, that's all I've got for now.
Great. So, David, if you could go next. David Levering.
Oh, yeah. So I am the Camps and Virtual Worlds director over at the Sternberg Museum of Natural History. I don't know a ton about academic unions other than I support them, but I'm looking forward to learning a lot from this panel about how they work and how I can better support them in the future.
Thanks, David. Patrick.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Yorkgitis. I am a fourth-year PhD candidate at the University of California, San Diego. There, my advisor is Dr. Guy Bertrand, and the lab we're in, you might call it the Bertrand Lab, but fun fact, it's also a joint UCSD CNRS International Research Lab. So joint endeavor between the French National Research System and UC San Diego. There, I do research on carbines, so I'm very much a fundamental synthetic chemist, no way, shape, or form related to paleontology, except both involve chemicals. Yeah, I am a union member of UAW 2865, which is our union local for teaching assistants as well as graduate student researchers, although we very recently amalgamated and are now also including the postdocs and research academic researchers who used to be on their own separate union. So I've been involved. We recently went on strike, so I've seen that process, a strike for an academic union. And I look forward to learning about the perspective from faculty unions, as well as sharing my perspective from the PhD candidate side.
Thank you, Patrick. Michael Stevens is next.
Hey, everybody. First of all, thank you for coming. I am a faculty member of the California State University system. We are unionized, and our graduate students are also unionized, associated with the UAW. I've been through 2 brief strikes in my long tenure at the Cal State system. And we are actually just had a strike authorization vote this week. I won't go into the details. I'm also the vice president of the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology, and we are very, very grateful for your participation in all the hard work that David has done for us.
So, without further ado, and with David's permission, I'd like to start by asking a couple of questions. Oh, and of course, my name is Ron Barret Gonzalez. Before I forget, I'm a faculty member here at the University of Kansas. I'm a former State of Kansas Conference president and chapter president, but we were only an advocacy chapter here. Like many red state educators, we are under the gun and pissed off and starved of cash and seen all the bad things have happened. And we're currently actively unionizing. So I'm, of course, one of the union organizers for the joint AFT AAUP union that will go to a vote here, hopefully within a month or two. So the first question, Ed Davis asked a couple of questions, and I'd like to put it to the panel. What is the most difficult aspect of organizing now in the wake of the COVID lockdown? So if any of the panelists have engaged in organizing and or getting unions up to snuff, could you speak to that?
I can talk a little bit about what we're doing here at Fort Hays. So during the COVID pandemic, of course, we all saw a lot of turnover. And so when new hires came on during that period, we weren't able to give them the same engagement that we normally would. New faculty orientation looked very different. So they weren't running into union members individually. And with Kansas being a right to work state, for those of you who are not in a right to work state, that means that the union represents you, but you do not have to pay dues. And so many of our faculty members didn't even know that they were represented by a union because administration doesn't tell them that for some reason, which can't imagine why that would be. but they don't draw a lot of attention to that. And so for us, we had a rather large hill to climb with getting new faculty, acquainted with the fact that they were in a union and they had a contract and they had rights. But since then, there's this exhaustion that everybody who was still left has gone through, and attending a union meeting is just one more thing on the calendar now. And so we have had to make specific pushes to show our relevance and to show them why we matter. And I think that has taken up, most of our time in these past few years. Right now, we're going through a membership drive, and we have increased our membership over the past, I would say, last spring and this fall, we've probably gotten 20, 30 new members. So that's a huge improvement from where we were.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate it. Patrick, you got a perspective on this?
Yeah, I would say, so I think the biggest lingering impact has been that there are many people in my cohort and the cohort after that. I've gotten the sense that some of them chose to do computational chemistry, in part due to COVID lockdowns impacting the ability to work at a bench, just the nature of our work as chemists. And so just how that may be reflected in other fields is we have people who, with our labs, where they don't actually need to be on campus. And so when we need to do a walkthrough where we're going from lab to lab, knocking on people's doors, trying to have conversations, there can be entire labs where they are not there, or they are there sporadically. And so those are people who can be very difficult to reach when we need to have organizing conversations, to build engagement, agitation, but also to even just let them know that, hey, there's going to be an event on XYZ date. Can you be there? Do you have questions? So I would say that's probably the most universal ongoing issue. But I would say to Mary's point about notifying people, I guess this isn't, maybe this is the case at your institution, maybe not, but at our institution, on your hiring paperwork, you are told you have a union and you have to sign whether or not you will be a member or not. And everyone, regardless of whether or not they sign on that new hire paperwork, is required to attend a 30-minute, usually it's more like an hour, union orientation, where we go over all their rights before and after the union contract, what we're doing now. For example, there's an ongoing issue in the chemistry department. We usually tell them. So on day one, they're being plugged into what are we currently fighting for. And I guess if you don't have that, I think that is like one of the most important things to have, because union access changes everything. And you get to have a say in the narrative from day one, because as Mary pointed out, the administration will not tell you anything they don't have to, and will probably imply that the union is a problem at every opportunity they have the chance.
That's one thing that if we tried to get that, it would be like pulling teeth. We have tried to get into new faculty orientation, and they won't let us. And now I want to put an asterisk on this. We have a good relationship with our administration. So even with a good relationship with our administration, we're never going to be on the hiring paperwork. We're never going to be in faculty orientation. For Professional Development Day, I was able to get a spot about we called it AAUP and U, and a 45-minute talk that was packed with deans and administrators there to ask the questions to make you say stuff that you don't want to have to say. And, thankfully, we've got smart people in our union, so it went okay, but it wasn't well attended by your average faculty member, because they just don't have that benefit of when they get here, someone says. And if we were to ask, in a right to work state, we are not allowed to do that, make them sign on one day, one way or the other. They have to come to us.
Because I know that we similarly, you don't have to pay dues. You don't have to contribute. But we do, it's in the contract, I guess. So I don't know when your contract negotiations are back up, but I think that's something I would never expect them to ever give that if you ask. You would definitely have to extract that out of contract negotiations, because they know what a big deal that is.
A couple of other things about Kansas: we are legally barred from striking. So we cannot strike at all. We cannot strike.
Oh, well.
It is against the law. And I forgot what my other point was, but we can't strike. We can't make people pay dues. They have done a great job of kind of hamstringing unions in this state, but we're still here. We still have, unionized campuses. And when Ron's campus votes, the vast majority of faculty in Kansas will be represented by a union.
Fingers crossed. We're trying. We're doing our damnedest.
I'm sure it's the case, but just asking, is AAUP or any other union actively engaged in lobbying the state legislature to change that?
Not necessarily to change that. We have Republican supermajorities in both houses. We have a Democratic governor, which a lot of us worked hard to put in, but the Democratic supermajorities are really tough to deal with. And we, so AAUP statewide and AFT and NEA joined forces a couple of years ago when they worked to shove guns on our campus. That galvanized a lot of us. We gave the NRA their first red state defeat, which was pretty cool. They wanted to put them in our med center campuses, and that we beat them down, but they still shoved them on the rest of the campuses across the state, which is just beyond moronic. So we don't have a lot of clout in this red state, but it's not as red as people would think. With the Democratic governor, and we fought back hard on women's reproductive rights. I don't know if the word made it to California, how we shoved that down their throats, and this is good. So women still have some rights here. It's amazing. It's good stuff. But back to the unionization stuff. I've got a question in many ways for Mary Elizabeth, but Patrick, you can please chime in. But let's let Mary go first. As a member of a standing union, what is the biggest challenge you face on a daily basis?
There's two main challenges. The first is apathy, because things are not terrible here. Administration does things that people don't like, but they've got very good messaging. And so a lot of people, because times are okay, they're not great, but they're okay. They don't see a real need to be active. And that's a problem because we have interest-based bargaining here, and that's in our contract. And what that means is when we go to the negotiating table, we bring our list of things we want to talk about. And administration can say, no, we're not talking about that to any one of those things on that list. Now, we can do the same to them. They've brought stuff to us where we've said, no, we are not, that's not even on the table. We're not. So it works both ways. But what happens when you have an apathetic unit is that the number of faculty members who pay dues is relatively low in percentage. And so when we go to administration and we say, we really need to talk about this, and they say no, and we say, but our faculty, they really want to talk about this. Right now, workload is a big thing. And that's going to, I think, really be in the next round that we talk about. But then the administration says, yes, but how many do you really represent? Meaning, how many of these faculty members you're talking about actually pay dues? And when that number is in a 30% range, we just don't have the teeth to come at them. The other problem that we have is the union is we don't do a good job of telling our own story. And what I mean by that is here in Kansas, when the governor says, we're going to give everybody in higher ed a 5% raise, what they mean is state employees get that. That's not faculty per se, that is your support staff. And the administration, they can always say, well, we could match that for faculty, but, and then they list all the same reasons that they always list for why they can't give us more money. But because we have a union, we can push on them pretty hard. And so we tend to get that same raise as faculty members. But rather than sending that email to our unit members and saying, hey, we advocated for you and we got you the same as our staff members, we don't do that. And then our president sends a nice email saying, you're welcome, we gave you all a raise. And everybody sends nice messages to our president saying, oh, you're such a wonderful, what a wonderful administration we have. They're so generous. So our two main challenges, getting our faculty members to understand how important that that activism is, and getting better at really touting it when we do things for our faculty.
That's excellent. Patrick, do you have a perspective on, your biggest challenges on a daily basis from union?
Yes, I think so. So we have strong membership. We have, I believe, supermajority teaching assistant membership. We have majority graduate student research membership, which is new because this is the first contract cycle where graduate student researchers have been unionized. We've been fighting for that for 20 years. Finally won it. It was a joint legislative contract battle, but we got it. So membership is strong. Not as strong for postdocs and academic researchers. You do see that in their contract. They settled first and they did not get as strong of a contract. I think the biggest issue, apart from apathy, because I think it's a universal thing. Just in anything you want to change in our society, you always have to fight against apathy. I think retaliation is probably the biggest obstacle. And I say that because, we, unlike faculty, as PhD students, our time here is very limited. It's also a very critical juncture in our careers, and our advisors have a huge influence over where we go next. Not so much that they may actively impede us, but they may simply choose to not go out of their way to help us, and that can in and of itself be a death sentence for your ambitions, depending on what you want to do. And our faculty are not unionized, and while we do a great job, I think, as a union of claiming our victories whenever we do secure something, you get lots of emails. There's lots of graduate students, especially international students, that are worried about harming their relationship with their advisor by being involved in the union. Because at least at UC San Diego, our administration has been very harsh. We had an event where we essentially crashed a donor party for the chancellor with about 60 graduate student workers, went on stage, held a sign, UC's most overpaid employee, asked him to respect the contract. The UC then filed student conduct charges against all 60 of them. No, the 60 conduct charges were filed, but only 2/3 of those people were actually there, and they were all charged with physically assaulting the chancellor. And we also recently had a couple students that were chalking some messages to support the union. UCPD showed up at their house in the middle of the night, took them to jail, charged them with felony vandalism, and ended up never formally pressing the charges. So at any time in the next 2-3 years, they can do that, but they never showed up in court to formally charge them. But we had 200 people turn out to the court that day from all around Southern California in support. But that's the kind of thing that our administration has done. And graduate students can be worried that if they go to an action to petition the chair or a rally on campus, they're concerned that, is this really going to change things? And even if it does, is it really worth the risk for me? I'm only here for so long. And I think that's a constant battle, because every time someone comes in, you have to sort of reorient their perspective. And especially when they're only going to be gone for so long, once they get to the 3rd, 4th year, it can be hard to get someone involved when they say, well, I'm almost gone. Why would I do this now? But thankfully, we've been good about getting 1st and 2nd year PhD students very engaged around some organizing campaigns related to their pay and pay inequity. And I think that has helped a lot. We have a very healthy group of leaders. Weekly meetings are very well attended. But still, when you talk to the average PhD candidate, there's a real worry that the relationship with their boss is going to be harmed. And during the strike, no faculty from our department spoke out in support. And they said that the labor relations department told them that they could be in legal jeopardy or something, which is BS, because faculty all across the UC system were coming out in public support. And so unfortunately, when faculty are in lockstep with the administration and labor relations, they generally do not support, and that has a chilling effect on union membership among students.
Patrick, a question along these lines. Do you think if the faculty themselves had a union, maybe even unionized under the same, you guys are UAW?
We're UAW, yes.
do you think that would have changed the dynamic and maybe made the faculty, more deferential to you, or is it just labor management man from the start?
I mean, I think if the faculty were unionized, that would definitely change their relationship with the administration. The thing is, when a lot of times the issues are on pay, and whenever we come to them saying you need to respect the contract, you need to pay us what we are owed by the language of this contract, their refrains are usually either it's out of our hands or there's no money. Have you tried complaining to the NSF? We do that. That's part of what we pay dues for. I would ask them, what are they doing? Because what if they do lobby, petition the administration on our behalf? I've never seen it. They've never let us know that they're doing that. And so the university, I think, does a very good job. The administration does a very good job of making it an us versus them problem. And I think for faculty, I just don't think they're organized. I think faculty that are in a very secure place, they have theirs. They don't have time to look out for the younger faculty. I think teaching faculty are also especially disadvantaged by this dynamic. They have a much larger workload. I guess their work is maybe less. They get less thanks for it. They're not doing top-tier research. They're teaching, but they're critical to sort of the business side of the university when you think about the teaching. But enrollment goes up, tuition goes up. The university takes 60% of all grant money, but then the faculty aren't organized and up in arms, fighting for more pay. They seem to just accept what they're told, or it just comes off like that. If they complain, they don't make those complaints public. And so to us, it just seems as if they are going along with what they're told. Even though if you ask them in private, they'll say, no, we also hate administration. But they don't seem to be with us in that. So
this seems like a more extreme case. One of the faculty union busting mechanisms that I've seen around the country is to pit tenure track faculty against non-tenure track faculty and then split and cleave them in that way. But this seems to be even more extreme because you guys are an RO1. You've got a ton of research volume coming in, and one unit, your union, is subservient in daily activities to another group, and that's a terrible power dynamic. Absolutely, but I'm glad you guys are standing together. And along these lines, so KU is an RO1 as well, but we have been traumatized and harassed in some ways. I mentioned the guns on campus thing, and there's a bunch of other, red state dynamics that have more or less galvanized us into a more cohesive unit. But maybe I can ask Mary this question. And we come across this on a daily basis, so you could really help us and a lot of other people. If you were speaking to a potential union member, and this is, and why don't we talk about non-tenure track and tenure track faculty first, then we could talk about students, but a potential union member during an organizing campaign who was scared of unionizing on a campus different than your own, what would you tell them?
Funny enough, I have a lot of experience with this, talking to my colleagues at KU over the past, year or so. So just for clarification, Fort Hays State University is a teaching institution. So while we do have a research component of our responsibilities, that is not our main activity. So everyone here is teaching faculty. We do have the occasional research scientist, but I think there's probably 3 on campus that are in the unit. So and this may be unique only to Kansas. So I don't know how applicable this is going to be to other places, but I run into that fear, not only from other campuses, but also here, new faculty, they don't want to get involved in the union because what if their administration, because they're non-tenure track and they want that tenure track position, or they're tenure track, and I hear that a lot. I go up for tenure next year, and once I get tenure, then I will XYZ. But being involved in the union is almost its own protection, because in many cases here in Kansas, They are just as afraid of you as you are of them, because they've heard scary stories about what these unions do in other places. And so when you're active in the union, you're visible. You are visible as someone who is knowledgeable about their rights and their safety in numbers. And there are federal protections for union organizing. That doesn't mean that administrations don't, try what they're not supposed to do anyhow. But that threat of lawsuits, of bad publicity, that ranks high enough on some of the radars that, it kind of takes the heat off, and they work on the people who are not active. And then they make them scared of wanting to take away their power, because, the union gets to decide then. And, otherwise you can, work directly with your chair and they can figure out what's best with you. If you go with the union, then you have to do what the union says. And so I think that getting over that fear of retaliation, which, Patrick, what is happening with your colleagues there and being harassed legally, and even what happened to our compatriots in Emporia? For those of you who don't know, the administration there just went and wiped out tenured faculty for reasons, and they had zero representation in that. And they came to Fort Hays and they tried to do some of the same kinds of things with reorganizing colleges and whatnot. But because we had the union, they were not willing to go to those lengths. And so the main thing that I tell people is just being involved and being visibly knowledgeable about what your rights are offers its own level of protection. That doesn't mean admin's not going to try and do stuff they're not supposed to, but you're no longer low-hanging fruit.
Thank you, Mary. Now, Patrick, clearly the dynamic that's going on at UCSD just seems outrageous to me. I mean, it's I couldn't imagine that. And in one way, it's got to be just terribly scary and worrisome. In another way, it might mean that the administration is your best organizer possible. What would you tell somebody who's scared of unionizing?
So I think it's critical that you claim your victories, in that when you successfully push back, everyone needs to know, everyone needs to be told, and it needs to be told in very clear language, because what is thought of as conventional leadership, people holding positions with lofty titles, a huge part of their MO is to take credit for anything that happens underneath them. But the fact of the matter is, in a unionized workplace, workers are the union. The workers, they are responsible for those changes. And so, for example, in the case of this retaliation I was telling you about, and if you do some Googling, you'll find it. Intercept had a great article on this, NPR as well. Since those things happened, the California Public Employees Relations Board recently filed an official complaint against the university about those and a few other items. And so, the state is taking notice, getting involved. That's because of our organizing. And I think that's critical, is that they would not have done that just on their own. It's only because members supported each other that happened. And anytime that happens, and I think especially when it happens outside of an official process, like the grievance processes or contract negotiation, that's when it's even more critical, because the power of a union is not in the language of the contract so much as it is in the solidarity of the membership. Because as our system can show you, you can have a contract that says XYZ, but the university has full-time lawyers whose job is to figure out every which way they can poke a hole in that, find loopholes, or they will simply ignore what is written. Because unfortunately, if they ignore what is written and the workers don't do anything, then they get away scot-free. And if you do catch them on it, odds are the consequences are not going to outweigh the benefits. It's a gamble that is almost always in their favor. And so the only way to circumvent that is to have, it's called like a shop floor culture, if you want to go back to manufacturing context. The the only way to preemptively stop that is to have such a strong shop floor culture. They are literally quaking in their boots that if we step out of line, the hammer's going to come down, and that the workers are going to be in lockstep on that. And that's like the dream. But getting there, every time you successfully grab people together, make noise, and get something, you have to remember that. You have to remind people about that. Because coming in, I don't think people think of change in that way. They think of change as in like you follow a magic spell, you talk to this person, fill out this form, then they say, ah, yes, we must give you what you deserve. And it doesn't work like that at all, anywhere. And so it's sort of this re-education as to how do you actually change your workplace, how do you change your community? And you have to show them examples all the time, because it's easy to forget, or it's easy to feel as if, oh, maybe it worked that one time, but it won't work the next time. But that's how it always works. And that's
So Patrick, a question along these lines. It sounds like you're involved, or rightfully so, in relatively constant agitation.
Yes.
So educating, agitating. What mechanisms do you use? I mean, most of us, we get a gazillion emails and we delete 96% of them. What do you do?
The only way, really, the only way is to have one-on-one or two-on-one conversations. And it will probably take 10 conversations with a given person to really get them on board. The rule that we like to use when we're bringing people into organizing is 30, 60, 10. 30% of people you talk to, yes, like anything you say, they're there for it. Might need to remind them or bug them a little bit to get them to actually turn out, but they're supportive. 10% going to be a hard no. You'll probably figure out that they're a hard no within 5 minutes. Don't waste your time. Then there's the 60%. That's the difference between a minority union and a super majority union. And that's where the hard work is. And it really, the way we do it is every week, we have some really great, very dedicated graduate student workers that have taken on leadership in terms of making sure things are organized and well run. Every week when we have a meeting, the major action item, among others, is everyone there needs to sign up to do a walkthrough. They're going to take an hour out of their day, pair up with a younger graduate student worker, and you're just going to go. And you're going to ideally find people. You're going to say, I'm going to talk to these 5 people today. And maybe there's some things coming up. We're going to get them to come out. And a common trap is you only mobilize. So you say, we're going to have a rally. Come to the rally. And then when they say yes, your job's done. And that won't build your strength. Organizing is a much more general, open-ended, ongoing conversation where you are primarily asking questions that get them to talk about the things they care about. And then your goal is to guide their thinking, to get them to continue to speak about it, but to also help get them around to the realization of what is possible and what change they can make by being engaged in their union. But it's a slow process. It's not a convenient process, but I don't think there's any way to do it other than having that conversation. And it's a real in-person conversation.
And Patrick, you're not talking about necessarily first time out organizing. You're doing this for sustainment. Is this correct?
Yes. Yes.
Wow, that's a huge amount of effort.
That's
Mary?
exactly what we're doing right now too. Exactly what we're doing. And that's how we have gained our new members over the past 2 semesters, is those one-on-one conversations. Right now, about every 2 weeks, we're holding just a union coffee where people can come and, tell us how useless we are, because I find them being mad about us is a good way to get them in the door. And then we can talk about the reasons. These are the barriers we face. That, interest-based bargaining is really the way this unit has been hamstrung in getting the big changes. And our union leadership now I want to be clear, they are very good at what they do. They've worked very hard to build the relationship they have with administration so that we have an open door. We can go in there and talk casually about anything. Now, whether or not we can get it on paper, that's a different story. But at least we have that relationship where there's not open hostility. But getting them to understand the ways in which we do work. And Patrick, with graduate students tend to be a bit younger and a bit more activist minded than tenure track faculty at a teaching institution. I mean, we've got an awful lot of worn out leather elbow pads here. And, for your folks, the problem is, well, I'm going to be done in a year. What difference does it make? Here it's, I'm going to retire in a couple years. I've got tenure. What difference does it make to me? And thankfully, we can point and say, look at Emporia. That's what difference it makes. And so, but you're absolutely right. Those one-on-one conversations and that time it takes, that is not, Ron, what you're doing to organize this unit, you're going to be doing for the rest of your life to keep it alive.
So a question for both of you. I mean, this is a huge time commitment for whoever's gonna handle this. Do you have a little bit of support or anybody on the payroll that's going to do this? President, vice president, organizing chair, anybody that makes a couple extra bucks a month from doing this, or is it all volunteer?
So for us, and Patrick, I'm going to be quick so you can jump in. We have no release time for it is written in, we don't get release time. Our contract says that they will let us use a room on campus and they won't bother us while we do it. Thankfully, our relationship with administration counts union work as service in our ASRs and in our tenure profiles. So I can put down my service to the union as service to the institution because it's part of shared governance.
So so UAW, it's member run. So we're not a service union in that. It's not like there's UAW staff whose job is to talk to members. Our dues that what we get from UAW is, I guess, we're part of UAW. There's legal counsel, sort of back end operations, but what really impacts us as workers is what we do as workers. And there's an opportunity for, because as graduate students, we're also employees of the university, and so you can be, a TA or a graduate student researcher, but there have been, some of our most involved union organizers have sometimes taken a position as a part-time organizer with the union. And so there are a few paid union staff roles where you not only organize in your department, but also elsewhere on campus. It's a ton of work, but it can help a little more money in your pocket, also free you up to do more organizing. And I'd say those roles, it's primarily for departments that have very weak union activity. For example, when I started in chemistry, it was one guy from physics and one guy from my department. And they were the union organizers for the whole department. It was just them. And now we have, to varying degrees of involvement, 20-ish people who you can try to get to go on a walkthrough. We have a very solid core that is meeting every week. And so at that point, we are self-sustainable. And so we don't have, someone who's being paid to help organize isn't going to spend time in our department because we don't need it. And really that's the goal, and that's probably one of the biggest issues is when you don't have enough involvement, the burnout is rough. You also maybe have to be a glutton for punishment a little bit because of how many times people may say no, or you may spend a whole hour and you can't find any of the people you want to talk to, or they don't want to talk to you, or you have a really depressing conversation with someone who's mad at the union for some silly reason that you need to then explain, and they're like, I don't know if I believe you, but I'll think about it. So yeah, it is. And that's why I think one of the very first things to do when you start getting someone involved is to get them into that mindset of we all need to be talking to each other. That's the first thing that happens when anything goes wrong, talk. And the more that becomes a culture, the easier it is to ask someone, hey, can you take some time to talk to some of your coworkers about this stuff? And yeah, sure, because that's just what we do.
Oh, that's excellent, Patrick. I appreciate that. Mary, we've got a real quick question from Rebecca McKean in the chat. It says, and this I think refers to advocacy chapters and maybe even a lack of an advocacy chapters. When no AUP orientation is provided at your institution and there's little organized action happening, how do you recommend learning more about the rights of faculty members in a particular state and as a member of AUP? I mean, I can field it for 10 seconds, and that is become active in the state conference, because there are a lot of people that know stuff around the state. Mary, can you comment for a sec?
Here at our group, because that's one thing that we are one of those gazillions of emails that you get that you delete. Because even though that's another thing in our contract is administration is required to give us a list of everybody who is within the bargaining unit and their contact information. And so we email them. Go to your meetings. Just show up at a meeting. You do not have to be a dues paying member. Just walk in that door and say, I'm a member of the bargaining unit and I want to know what my rights are. And we will hand you a copy of the MOA and our little, it's probably at home on my, we laugh that we sleep with the little red book on our nightstands. And we will get you copies of those things. And we have our website that our unit has, which not every unit's going to have one, but really find the people who are part of your union and just go talk to them. They're going to be happy to speak to you. And if you don't know how to get a hold of your state conference, contact AAUP and tell them that you want to know, and they will get you where you're going.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, no, I think Rebecca was talking about, she asked what a red book is. So I recommend looking it up online. It's sort of a Bible of policies and procedures. It's for our industry. I tell administrators it's our industry best practices book. It's what can be done. And Rebecca, good luck with this stuff. And really, if you're an advocacy chapter, which is not a union, step below a union, seek out those individuals who know stuff, and there will be people around the state, and they can get you up to snuff on the rights. And along these lines, we're 8 minutes until we expire. I've got a question for both you, Mary and Patrick. And Patrick, it sounds like you're very close to this. But Mary, maybe you can describe this briefly. What's happened at Fort Hays has your union had to take the administration to court in support of an individual faculty member or collective on an issue? And if so, how did it go?
I can address this real quickly. It has been probably 15 years since we've had to do that. And it was so such a long and drawn out process for both parties that nobody wants to have to go through it again. And this is one of those times where thankfully our administration was traumatized by it. That was still 2 presidents ago, but there's that institutional memory of we don't want to have to do that. And they also see in the papers how the administration of other universities that do those things, how they're portrayed, and they don't want that either. And so it's been a hot minute since we've had to do it, but we're always ready to do it again if we have to.
Yeah, so in our case, what I was referring to about the student workers who were arrested, so I guess that was the case of the university taking us to court, or members to court, and we just showed up in support of them. Off the top of my head, I cannot think of a case where there may have been one student who unfortunately no longer a part of a university, ended up just leaving to greener pastures and industry. But there was someone, he was organizing an anti-bullying letter in collaboration with the union, ended up getting severe pressure from various faculty members, ended up leaving. But I believe the university may have been sued in that. And so I think that could be a matter of public record. But really, primarily what we do is we use the grievance process within the contract. It is also still a drawn out process. But what that entails in our case is generally you have a first meeting with labor relations, where you discuss the issue. Maybe it gets resolved there. If not, it gets escalated to a second meeting where a few higher ups are involved. And then at that point, If the university is still not granting a remedy for the grievance, then it moves on to arbitration. And it can take a very long time to have those arbitration meetings where you then have a third-party arbitrator, both sides agree upon it, and then whatever the arbitrator decides is binding. And the grievance process is powerful in that respect, not something you want to rely on too much because your power really is in your members, and the grievance process is expensive. But that is, I guess, what we do to regularly take them to court, so to speak. And yeah, I mean, that it's in a slow process, and I think we're only just now starting to see some of the initial issues that we've filed grievances over get resolved. However, one major one where the university ended up just caving, at least in our department, when we teach, we have to take a class for teaching. There's no instruction as part of that class, it's just we sign up for it for units. And there were about 30 people during the strike who were given unsatisfactories for those teaching credits because they went on strike. And so of course that is retaliation. Of course the university said, no, it's not. But lo and behold, the department decided, you know what, we're just going to get rid of the practice of having a Chem 500 class. And of course we made sure to make sure everyone knew that is because we organized around it. And they knew that they could not keep that around. And so I think the grievance has since been dropped because they've granted the remedy. Although we're still trying to get the U grades fixed, which is its own interesting problem, because now you're essentially having someone who's not the instructor of record determine what the grade should or should not be. But we're working on it.
No, it's brilliant. So we got a couple minutes left. Just a quick question for you, Mary Elizabeth. Do administrators have any role in your union? Do they have the ability to show up to your meetings, or are they locked out? How do administrators, individual people, interact with you guys?
So administrators can be what is known as associate members here, meaning they can pay dues to us, but they're not represented and they have no voting rights. So they can come to our meetings, but they can't vote. And, we had one person, let's see, it was maybe a year ago when we were having some challenges, who was an administrator. He was an associate member and was also listed as in the bargaining unit, which administrators, if you supervise, have supervisory duties, hiring, firing, merit, evaluation, anything over another unit member, you cannot be in the bargaining unit. So that's why we don't have grad students in our unit. One day we hope to get that figured out. But he was constantly sending kind of agitating in the other direction emails every time we'd come out with something. And we met with administration and said, he's got to quit this because, this is violating the spirit of our MOA. This can't continue. And we've got another dean kind of doing this right now. And administration went to this person and said, no, you can't be doing this. You're technically batting for our team, and our team doesn't want to take this approach. Usually that's the result of those kinds of issues. But they can come to meetings, they just have to behave themselves.
No, I appreciate that. No, there's some people in our unit who think it's okay to have administrators with full voting membership.
No.
And I'm just like, I don't think that's good. Patrick, real quick, in a minute or two, have you guys ever had tenure track faculty or supervisors come to any of your meetings at all?
No, and if they did, there would be hell to raise. We had an issue early on in the strike where faculty would come to the picket lines and stare down people looking for their students to intimidate them, to drag them back in the lab. And so, no, I think if anyone in a supervisorial position came to an organizing meeting, it would probably be very clear that you are not welcome here, you should not be here, or we would just leave. I don't think we would tolerate their presence. Wow. Because
so you guys have no cool faculty that are going to bat for you guys, huh?
If they want to support, because there are a lot of faculty that will in private say they support their students, but you're not going to support your students by listening in our meetings. You're going to support our students by coming to our actions and making a public stand with us. And I think it would take some serious a seriously good reputation for us to be okay with them actually being part of our meeting rather than some separate meeting where
Sure.
we talk with them. Yeah.
No, that's good. No, I very much appreciate it. So Mary, Patrick, thank you very much for your wise counsel here. We are at 1 o'clock. And David, how about I turn it back over to you?
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you all for excellent insights and voices of experience on these matters. And for everyone in the audience with your questions to kind of help move this conversation along. Like I said before, this is being recorded. It's going to be up on YouTube later. We've got some contact information in the chat that I definitely recommend people write down. And I'm hoping that we can do something like this again at the virtual meeting next year, maybe exploring other components of academic labor organizing and make that something that we do consistently. So with that, we've got more events coming up later today. I definitely recommend folks check those out. And with that, we're going to sign off, and I'll see folks around the virtual museum. If folks have questions about getting in touch, just let me know and I can provide contact info as well.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.